Some people have gotten the impression that Panama City crayfish are very difficult to recognize, that only a handful of experts in the world can tell one crayfish from another, and that's really not the case. So for identifying Panama City crayfish, you have two questions. The first question is, am I within the range of the Panama City crayfish? If I'm not, then it's not a question. If you're outside of that range that's on the map, the question isn't even there. You don't need to concern yourself. The subgenus that the Panama City crayfish belongs to includes a number of species that are scattered across the panhandle. The Panama City crayfish is restricted to that little area right there, which you all know because you're from Panama City. Within that range, then, what are you looking at? These are Panama City crayfish. Panama City crayfish typically has this light stripe down the middle. There are exceptions, but even when the stripe is missing, it still has this dark punctation on the sides of the carapace here. The other very common crayfish is Crocambarus pycnogonopodus, and I use scientific names because a lot of things in nature don't really have common names. The American Fisheries Society has actually assigned common names to all the crayfish. If you want a common name, they call this the stud crayfish.
Again, if you look at the...
These look more edible to you.
If you look at the sides of these guys have white spots. Besides those two dark ones, they don't have that black stippling. And again, as Paul said, all three of these crayfish species will be in the same wetland.
But again, if you look at the Roman nose, and as soon as this molts, it'll look like that light one again.
Oh, okay.
You want to handle that?
Yeah, they hurt. These have big claws, but come on. That's how difficult it is to recognize the Panama City crayfish. Males and females, that's how hard it is to tell them apart. That's a male with the gonopods folded forward between the legs. That's a female that doesn't have that. But the majority of them live in flatwoods habitats with saturated soils that seasonally flood. Flatwoods habitats, the soils are saturated, have a hard pan. When it rains, shallow depressions flood. And that's where this particular group of crayfish live. One thing that's happened in this sort of habitat throughout the southeast is conversion to silviculture. And you run pine trees through there and they grow up, it grows up, you lose all of that herbaceous undercover. You end up with little pools like this, which still have Panama City crayfish, although populations are generally not as rigorous, not as robust as they are in those open herbaceous wetlands. Another thing that happens is, in order to lower the water table, man has come in and dug ditches. The purpose of ditching is to lower the water table. What that does is eliminate that seasonal flooding in some of those flatwoods habitats, and you lose the habitat, except that in the ditch itself you still have that environment, and that's where you still have the crayfish left.